Alright guys, well welcome back to another video. I know it's been a really long time since I've made one, but had some time on my hands, quarantine, 2020, end of the world. Not really. Got time on my hands, so I figured I'd make a video just talking about the different tools that I use, and this isn't all of them, but this is the ones that I go to in my toolbox that I take with me if I need to fix something or that I pull out of the garage when I got a problem to repair on a vehicle. And this is in conjunction with a full socket set, which I'll show you at the end of the video, my socket set. But these are all the hand tools that I use, and really all the tools. I don't really use very many power tools, so let's start going through these and let's just talk through each one and why I have them in my toolbox and why I use them. The reason that they're all laid out like this is because I just finished cleaning them all up. They were all covered in grease and a mess from working on cars. And when that happens, every time you touch your tools, your hands get greasy. So that means greasy hands. Greasy hands means every time you go to get in the vehicle to start it or roll down a window or whatever you're doing, you get grease on the interior, grease on the paint. It's just not a good way to work. Clean tools makes things a lot more efficient and a lot more pristine when you're done with the job. Alright, so let's start right on top and get right into it. So this is a rubber mallet, pretty self-explanatory. You use it to hit stuff that you don't want to damage, like a regular steel hammer. God forbid you use a waffle face framing hammer, because that'll really jack things up. But this is nice and smooth rubber, so you can hit stuff and it just doesn't damage it. So that's always nice to have, because when things fall apart, you end up hitting stuff and you don't want to damage it. So that's why I got that. This is a brake caliper compressor, I believe is what they call them. And this one's from Harbor Freight. It's like the cheapest one that they sell. Might be the only one they sell, I'm not sure. But this is just kind of nice to have, but I will say this is not the one to get. This one's kind of junk. See how short this little handle is on the end? Every time you try and turn that, it's really hard to turn. So I always end up grabbing this thing and turning it, and it's just not a good way to do things. But this works. This will get the job done. It's just not great. So that's why I got this thing. And I always put this in the bottom of the toolbox just because I really don't use it that often. Only when you're doing brakes. So it goes in the bottom of the box. This is a set of channel locks, and it's a pretty big set of channel locks. These are, again, fairly self-explanatory. They're like pliers plus. They're just better than regular pliers when you really need to get a bite on something. And this angle, like regular pliers, it's all in a straight plane here. The fact that these are cambered out a little bit that way makes these nice for grabbing stuff like those. If you've ever seen those spring type hose clamps that you got to pinch together and slide back, and you got to pinch them and slide them back over, these work well for that. So you can just grab them, slide the hose clamp back, slide it back when you're done. So these are nice to have. I wouldn't recommend grabbing bolts with these just because you can see there's teeth in there. These will kind of chew up bolts, but I guess if you're in a pinch you can use that for grabbing a bolt, but I wouldn't recommend it. This is pretty self-explanatory. Just a short length of hose. This, any type of hose. This happens to be air hose. It's just nice when you have to drain a radiator, or something, to be able to just redirect the fluid where you need it to go, because some of these car manufacturers put the drain right on top of a frame rail and it ends up going everywhere. So sometimes you need to just get a little piece of hose on there and redirect it where you need it to go. These are strap wrenches. I got these in a kit, I want to say about 2 years ago, and the reason I bought them was because I needed to get a fan clutch off of a truck I was working on, and to get the fan clutch loose you have to hold the water pump still, but there's still a pulley on the water pump. So what you have to do is hold the pulley still, and the belt on the truck, the serpentine belt, doesn't hold them. So you take off the serpentine belt and then you put this over the pulley and it grabs and hangs onto that pulley so that you're able to loosen your fan clutch. And these have a lot of different uses because you can grab stuff and twist stuff that you don't want to mar up. Like if you were, for example, back to the crescent wrench. If you were grabbing something with this crescent wrench, sure, you might be able to grab it and turn it, but you're going to mar it up. With a strap wrench, it's just rubber. You're not going to hurt anything. So these are nice to have, especially for how cheap these ones were from Harbor Freight. I think both of these were under $10, and they're just great to have, and you'll do a lot less damage to stuff if you're using these instead of like a set of pliers or a crescent wrench. A screwdriver, but it's not any screwdriver. This is flippable, so I can go flathead, Phillips, and then on this side you got number 2 Phillips and a larger flathead. And this thing's just great because you got 4 screwdrivers in one. There's nothing more annoying than working on a car when you have to jump back between, you know, flathead, Phillips. You can also use this to pry stuff up, so it's nice to just nice to have all those in one. This is an adjustable wrench. This one's an 8-inch from Harbor Freight. I bought the cheapest kit of adjustable wrenches they had at Harbor Freight just because I don't use adjustable wrenches that often, but they are nice to have when you need them. Like if you're holding a nut on the backside of a bolt, these work well for that, and it's just always nice to have adjustable wrenches. Another thing that a lot of people don't know about adjustable wrenches is if you ever have anything flat, like a flat piece of steel or something, and you need to bend it, you can slide an adjustable wrench over the flat piece of steel, and you can actually clamp pretty solidly and then bend the steel with a crescent wrench. Obviously you want to use as big of a crescent wrench when you're doing that as you possibly can, but that is another possibility use for a crescent wrench. And don't use crescent wrenches as hammers, you'll tear stuff up. Another set of channel locks. This one's just a little bit smaller, which is more convenient to get out. That's why I keep it in the top tray of the toolbox. Okay, these are really awesome. These are beyond useful for how much they cost. I think these are under $4 for this whole kit from Harbor Freight. And honestly, okay, let's get this out of the way right now. Harbor Freight tools, I'm not here defending Harbor Freight tools. I don't think Harbor Freight tools are great. Frankly, a lot of them are pretty garbage. But the right tools used properly can be quite effective. And that's the case with these. They're just awesome to have, and they're simply pry tools. Like, you're not going to put a lot of stress on this, or at least you shouldn't because they're small. But they're sharp enough. You get 4 of them. If you're ever taking O-rings off of oil filter housings or trying to, you know, grab a little snap ring or something, these are really good at that. And they're just, like, seriously so great to have in your toolbox because when you need them, you really need them. So make sure you pick yourself up a set of little pry tools, or I don't even know what you call these, picks. A little set of picks. Another small adjustable wrench. These are nice for getting battery terminals off sometimes, you know, just undoing those little bolts. Another pry tool, pick sort of thing. 2 more really small flathead screwdrivers. These are good for pulling off snap rings and other things. It's just a box cutter. It's nice to have a box cutter just to open boxes and to cut down hoses, to open up like jugs of oil to cut that little piece of garbage, like tinfoil seal off of them, because they never make them possible where you can just pry it off with your hand, which is so annoying. So you have to get these out and open up your oil. But this is just a great all-around tool to have. Let's talk about these things. So this is a fuel line disconnect tool. Now fuel lines use this trick connector where there's a bead rolled in one piece of pipe and the other piece comes over it, and it's got this like spring tensioner that holds it on, and these go into that fitting and push that spring out so that you're able to pull the fuel line off. This one is like a 4-in-1 or like 8-in-1 for different sizes. I wouldn't get this one. I had to get this one because there was a spot where, honestly, I don't even remember why. It was like, and these are just the same thing. They just go and slip on and push off the spring. But I got this one because there was somewhere that this one wouldn't work for me, or I needed more leverage on it or something. But anyway, so I got all these. I would buy this kit of them because this kit's just a lot nicer. These are anodized, color coded with the fuel line size and scripted. But this one, I would try to avoid buying this one if you could, because these aren't that expensive and they're just a lot easier to have in your toolbox, and the color coding helps keep track of them. But yeah, if you're going to be working on cars, eventually you're going to do something fuel related, and you're going to want a set of fuel line disconnect tools. Next, let's talk about screwdrivers. Not just this screwdriver. I have 4 other large flathead screwdrivers. Now, this screwdriver is more of a pry tool than anything, just because of its size and the fact that it's got a nice wide face on it and you're not going to destroy anything. So this is good to have as just a pry tool. These screwdrivers can be used as regular screwdrivers, or you can use them as punches. You can use them as almost like a chisel sometimes if you need to do that. You can use them as pry tools to get off snap rings and different things. I mean, one thing that I've learned is that you've got to get kind of creative when working on cars, because you're not always going to have the right tools, and sometimes stuff is damaged in a way where the right tools don't work for you. So you have to get creative and come up with different solutions. So it's just always nice to have a variety of things like flathead screwdrivers that you can pick from in your arsenal to get stuff apart and to make things work. Big tool, big important tool here. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's a torque wrench. You want to have one of these. I know a lot of guys are going to go, oh, just do it by feel, it'll be fine. I get that, but some stuff is important, like, you know, caliper bolts. You don't want to screw up the tension on your caliper bolts. 1, you don't want them coming loose from you under tightening them, and 2, you don't want to stretch them and weaken them from over tightening them. So that's where a torque wrench is very, very useful. The way a torque wrench works is, you see those letters scribed in there with 1 through 100 or 10 through 150 foot-pounds. You loosen this up, that little wheel on the bottom, you loosen that up, then you can turn this clockwise to increase the torque, turn it counterclockwise to decrease the torque, and the way these work is you'll hear a click. As you're pushing on it, you'll hear it go click, click, and that's how you know that you got it torqued to the proper spec. But these are important to have. I worked for a couple of years on my own cars, like actually did major work, you know, more than just like, oh, I'm changing a hose or something, without a torque wrench. But honestly, with a torque wrench, it gives you a lot of peace of mind that you've just done the job correctly and you don't have to worry about it. You know, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes you tighten a bolt like too tight and you kind of wonder, like, is that bolt close to breaking? I don't know if that's just me. It might just be me. But if you know, you know. Let's talk about a ratchet. This ratchet is from Harbor Freight. It's a Pittsburgh. I think this is like their top of the line ratchet, or it was at the time. This ratchet is awesome. It's got a swivel head. I think it's a 72 tooth. You want as high a tooth count as you can get on a ratchet, because that means you have as little handle movement as possible to get the next tooth. And when you're working in tight quarters, that's really important. This has a 13-inch handle, so you get a lot of torque on a fastener while using it, and you just flip the direction on and off right there. The one gripe I have about this ratchet is that if you're using it with your hand over the head, this will tend to get like stuck. Well, not stuck. It'll flip itself to in between on and off, and then it doesn't know which direction it's going. But you can just fix that by just flipping it back, and it's no problem. Yeah, these are great to have. Make sure you get a nice ratchet. It'll make working so much more enjoyable, and jobs will go a lot smoother if you have a nice ratchet. Pliers. Let's talk about pliers. Almost all these pliers are a form of needle nose pliers besides this one. This I believe they call a set of lineman pliers, and it's always good to have pliers whether you're just trying to crimp something or tighten something up, or these have so many possibilities. You can grab something and pull something. There's just so much stuff you can do. This set of lineman pliers has a wire cutter in it, so if you're in a pinch you can cut some wires. It's also got a grip on the inside of the handle so you can grab something that way and turn it. These are just handy to have, keep them in the toolbox, but these are all a form of needle nose pliers. Now, you probably ask yourself, why do you have 4 needle nose pliers in your toolbox? Well, they all serve kind of a different purpose. This set, you can tell, it's got a relatively long neck on it and really small teeth at the end there. So these are nice for grabbing snap rings or different things that need just like a little bite on the end. You don't need a lot, just a little bite. And if you're working in like an axle or something and there's a snap ring far down in the axle, the long neck on this is helpful at grabbing that and pulling it out. So long neck, that's why I have those ones. These two are just general needle nose pliers, and when you need needle nose pliers, you need needle nose pliers. Okay, regular pliers aren't going to do it. Sometimes needle nose is just what you need. So these two I have for when you need needle nose pliers. This set is pretty trick because it's almost like a 45 or a 90 degree on that. And these are good, again, for snap rings where you can go, pretend that this is like a collar or something. There's a snap ring down there. You can get down in there, bite the snap ring, pull it out. And I know I should just get a pair of snap ring pliers for snap rings, but sometimes needle nose work as well, and they're just effective to have around. 2 more crescent wrenches. This is a big 12-inch crescent wrench, which is pretty much the go-to tool for taking off a fan clutch. I've rented those fan clutch removal tools from like the auto parts store, and the face of those isn't very big. Like, see how wide that is there? That's at least a ½ inch. The face on the ones that you rent from the hardware store are like, they are less than 1/4 inch on the width of the face. So I just, when you can fit these in, I like to use a big adjustable wrench. Another adjustable wrench. This one doesn't fit over fan clutches, but just nice to have another big adjustable wrench for if you're working on, you know, suspension bolts or something like that where you're dealing with a much larger bolt than you could grab with a smaller adjustable wrench. Mini sledge. Mini sledges are great to have for loosening bolts when you can't get it loose by just pulling on it and you want to shock the bolt. You can hit the end of a wrench with a mini sledge. Don't hit the end of your ratchet. You'll probably break the teeth in it. But the end of a wrench you can hit with a mini sledge, and sometimes that'll like break open a bolt or unfreeze it. Another thing that these are good for is shocking connections like on a tie rod end or something like that where you have something that's pressed into a sleeve. Sometimes you can shock it and break up the rust and corrosion that's in there and get those to come apart. So these are really handy for that. If you're using like a, what do you call it, a pickle fork. If you've ever seen a pickle fork, it's just a fork that goes over a tie rod end and shoves them apart. This is good for hammering in the end of the pickle fork and getting that to come apart. This one I like because it's got a short handle. I don't know what the weight is on this, but it might be 2 or 3 pounds. It's really nice to be able to just deliver a lot of energy with a short handle, because whenever you're working on cars, you're working in pretty confined quarters, so you don't have a lot of room to get a full swing on. So it's nice to have a short handle where you can just kind of pound something away. But yeah, great to have. Make sure that you have a mini sledge, because a rubber mallet just doesn't deliver the same amount of power that a mini sledge will. Side cutters. Side cutters, some people I think call these dikes. Pretty great to have. You can cut anything from zip ties to wire. You can even strip the shielding off a wire, the insulation, by just kind of putting the wire in there, turning it, and then pulling it off. So these have a whole host of uses, mainly for cutting stuff. But when you need to cut something like wire or zip ties, these just can't be beat. So make sure you have a set of side cutters, wire cutters, dikes, whatever you call them. Alright, let's talk about scrapers real quick. If you've ever worked on a car, replaced a seal, taken off a differential cover, taken off a transmission pan, replaced an intake manifold gasket, you know that everything's always a mess, right? You gotta clean the mating surfaces, make sure everything's nice and clean so there aren't gonna be any leaks, no air leaks, no fluid leaks, nothing like that. So whenever cleaning a mating surface, you want to start with preferably a plastic scraper. So you do not want to gouge the surface. With these, you can scrape as hard as you want. You can cram this thing on there, and you're not going to hurt the mating surfaces. But these don't always work. Sometimes you have to get more aggressive, in which case I like to use a straight edge razor blade. You get a lot of control, especially when you have one of these holders. You just flip that around, lock it into place, and now you can go around and scrape a mating surface, scrape the old gasket off and get everything clean. So these are just really nice to have for that, and you can use them for cutting stuff, but that's why I have the box cutter. These are pretty much exclusively for cleaning mating surfaces, and they work really well at that. But you don't want to gouge the mating surface, or else you will have a terrible time trying to get it to seal again. So be very, very careful when using these. Don't gouge the mating surface. Don't cut your own hand apart, because these things are very sharp. This is just a little pack of replacement blades. I got this set at Walmart. It's really cheap. Just good to have in your toolbox, because when you need it, you need it. This here I got at Harbor Freight. I don't see any reason that this is, an inferior tool because it's from Harbor Freight, because it's so basic and it just does what it needs to do. This is a magnet on the end. If you drop a bolt down an engine compartment, you can go down, you can pick it up and pull it right out. So this is really easy, really nice to have, and necessary when you need it. So pick yourself up one of these. This, just a short 1/4 inch extension. It's good to have different sizes of extensions, because when you're working in confined quarters, if an extension's too short and you can't get around something to get to a bolt, you're not going to be able to get the job done. If your extension's too long and you're running into something else, you're not going to be able to get the job done. So you just want a plethora of extensions, which I keep with all my sockets, because that's all they're ever used with, in your toolbox, to make sure that you can get to the bolts and get them tightened or get them loosened for whatever job you're trying to perform. So just make sure you have a lot of different extensions. Sharpie, you always want a Sharpie. Labeling things, marking bolts so that you know you've tightened them. Just keep a Sharpie. You'll be glad you have it. Breaker bar. Breaker bar, breaker bar, breaker bar. So you want a breaker bar because when a bolt is really tight and you need to loosen it, break it loose. If it's corroded on and stuck, you do not want to use your ratchet to pull that apart. You don't want to put an adjustable wrench on it, because there's a chance you could round out the head of the bolt. You want to use a breaker bar to break it loose initially. I mean, you could stick a pipe over the end of this thing, triple the leverage on it, kick this thing, hit it with the mini sledge. You're not going to break a breaker bar, at least not one that's well made. And I'll get to that in 1 second. This used to be a breaker bar until I broke it. That's pretty funny, actually, breaking the breaker bar. I broke this breaker bar putting the balancer pulley bolts back in on a Ford 6.4 liter diesel, because they had to be torqued, I think it was like 250 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. It was like an insane amount of torque. But this thing broke while doing that. Luckily I had that other one. Now I just keep this in my toolbox as a general pry tool. It's nice to just be able to yank and pry on something. Hopefully I don't break the other end using it as a pry tool, but I wouldn't be surprised if I did. Again, just nice to use as a pry tool and have. This is a really big adjustable wrench, and it might look like a pipe wrench to you, but if you look closely, there's no serrated teeth in there. Just nice and smooth. So you can use this on regular bolts. I don't use this very often because I don't really come across bolts that are bigger than what a 12-inch adjustable wrench will handle. But when you need something to grab a big bolt, you need a big wrench. So this is good to have. Not necessary though. This is not necessary for general work. Vice grips. Let's talk about vice grips. The big bad vice grips. Vice grips are a blessing and a curse all in one. You can do some serious damage to stuff with vice grips. You can ruin the heads of bolts with vice grips. But when you need vice grips, they're great to have because you can grab a hold of something so tight, and unlike pliers where you have to hold the tension on with your hand, you can lock in a set of vice grips and that sucker is not coming loose until you tell it to come loose by pushing it out. So if you're ever having a bolt head that's rounded out, or if you have a screw head that's rounded out, you can grab onto that and then turn it. Great to have when things start going wrong, but they're also great to have for pinching off coolant hoses or any sort of hose where you don't want to have all the fluid pour out of something. You can use these to bite off the hose and it'll keep the fluid from running out. These two I wouldn't use for doing that though, because these have really sharp teeth on them, like the majority of vice grips do. This one has pretty dull teeth, so you could use it on a hose or something like that. They do sell vice grips that are specifically meant for biting off hoses. I don't know if they call them like a hose stop or something. I'll leave a link to those down in the description so you can check those out. But vice grips are great to have when you need them. This is actually pretty awesome. I was cleaning out a lady's house before she moved, and this is a 1/2-inch ratcheting attachment for like a breaker bar, and it turns your breaker bar into a ratchet. And this is actually a snap-on. See that, guys? How cool am I? I have snap-on tools. But yeah, this is a snap-on ratchet attachment, and this is cool. And I like to use this whenever I am changing the oil filter on a Ford diesel or something where you have that big 1/2-inch socket. And if you don't want to bust out your 1/2-inch ratchet and all that mess, you can just use the breaker bar with this to get that oil filter apart. I'm really glad I found these. I don't know if, I'm sure somebody still makes these. I don't know if Snap-on still makes them, but awesome tool to have. And last but not least, safety glasses, guys. You want safety glasses, and on some occasions you want hearing protection if you're hitting your wrench or whatever. It makes a lot of noise, but definitely safety glasses, because whenever you're working under a car, gravity is going to pull dirt, rust, fluids, everything is going to fall on your face, and you're going to have your eyes open because you're trying to get the work done. You've got to have safety glasses, or else you're going to end up with crap in your eye, and the job's going to go south, and you're going to be mad, you got junk in your eye, job's not going well. It's just going to be a frustrating experience. So if you just wear your safety glasses from the beginning, you can get a job done quicker, smoother, without frustration and crap in your eye. One last thing, I don't keep this in my toolbox. I keep it in a toolbox in the garage, so it doesn't really come with me. It's not very portable. But this is a brass wire brush. This came in a kit from Harbor Freight. Again, these are kind of disposable, so it's not a big deal if you get a nice one or not a nice one. But this is great for cleaning mating surfaces again, guys. A lot of what you do as a mechanic or fixing your car, I mean, I'm not a mechanic, I'm just at home working on cars. A lot of what you're going to spend your time doing is cleaning mating surfaces to make sure everything's clean. Make sure things are going to seal. Make sure things go back together properly. Make sure there's no rust and corrosion. Make sure there's no stuck on dirt. So wire brushes, especially a brass wire brush, because this is not going to tear up the mating surface, are so important to have, because having a clean mating surface is very important whenever working on a car. Well, one last thing that I want to do before we end this video and believe me, the video's almost over, I know it's a long video, is talk about my socket set here. This is a Craftsman set. I don't know if it's like the 260 piece set or whatever. I'll put a link to them down in the description. I think this is a really great set, and I don't make any money off the link, so just go click on the link. It's not a big deal. This is a great socket set to have, especially if you're starting out, because it's got everything that you're going to need from a socket perspective in it already, pretty much. I'm not going to say it has everything, but it's got pretty much everything, because you're still going to want to buy stuff like swivel adapters and longer extensions. It's always good to have longer extensions. And just talk about what comes in this real quick. Up on top, you've got quite a few ratcheting wrenches, and it's got this nice compartment where I just throw things like, you know, a 1 foot 3/8 extension, which is really honestly very helpful. So you're going to want to make sure you pick up longer extensions than a 6-inch. You know, I just got an assortment of different odd sockets. Like this is a 36 millimeter socket, which didn't come with it, but you need this for changing oil filter and fuel filter on Ford diesels. So, you know, this is stuff that I have that's specific to vehicles I work on, okay? That's another thing. You're gonna be doing stuff and purchasing tools that are vehicle specific. So once you find out what kind of cars you're working on, you're gonna want to go out and purchase the tools for those vehicles. Like Fords use a lot of 13, 15. Their diesels use 36 millimeter for oil changes and fuel filter changes. But in here I just keep, you know, random sockets, just a towel for cleaning up oil or messes like that, gloves, disposable gloves. Always want to wear gloves when you're working on a car. And a pro tip is, I've found that if you just put on a pair of gloves, you're going to end up shredding them pretty quick, especially if it's like hot outside and you're sweating. For some reason they get like weak. I don't understand it, but if you double up your gloves, so you put on one pair of gloves, then you put on another pair of gloves, they tend to last a lot longer. And after you've shredded the first pair, you're able to take that pair off and put on another pair. But when you don't have them doubled up and you shred your pair of gloves, your hand is all sweaty and you can't get it in the glove. The glove like sticks and hangs up. So wearing 2 pairs of gloves sounds weird, but it's very effective and very useful. So going through the rest of this kit, right now I'm using it on a project, but there's a kind of socket driver, screwdriver thing that takes a whole host of different bits. Comes with it. All these sockets on the top tier are 1/4 inch, just an assortment of 1/4 inch. Comes with a 1/4 inch ratchet. These are cool because you can put these in drills and impact wrenches, and you can loosen and tighten bolts that way. And a couple different extensions, but these are all the extensions that come with it, besides the 1/2 inch extension in the bottom drawer. You always want to get more extensions. So if you ever see like a pack of extensions or something like that, buy it, because they're so useful and so like effective when you need them. Like, it's hard to explain. Sure, you could put a bunch of extensions together like this to get more length, but then you end up with slop and just not as user friendly, let's say. I keep just a few different adapters. Like this is 1/4 inch to 3/8. This is 3/8 to 1/4 inch, and these are all just things that are nice to have. We're working on cars because you never know what kind of thing you're gonna have to like slam together. This is where all of the 3/8 inch sockets are stored. And honestly, it's a really comprehensive kit. You got everything from like 6 millimeters and 3/8 all the way up to 22, I believe. Yeah, 22 millimeters. So shallow and deep, 6 point, 12 point. It's got pretty much everything you need. Even a spark plug socket. And the reason that it's a spark plug socket is down in there, I don't think you can see it, but there's a rubber boot that grabs the spark plug so it doesn't let it just fall out. If you were just using a deep socket, the spark plug would just fall and you would have trouble getting it up out of the cylinder head. But with this, it hangs on to it with that little rubber boot. So it's good to have a spark plug socket. And then the bottom one, this is where the 1/2 inch stuff is. 1/2 inch, they don't have a deep socket. So you might want to look into investing in a deep half-inch, maybe even impact-rated socket, assortment, but I haven't seen the need for that. What I've done is, like that 35 millimeter from earlier in the video, I just go buy the specific socket just because I really don't use them that often. One thing about the half-inch sockets that come with this kit, though, they're all 6-point, which I always thought was kind of weird. Half-inch, you're dealing with big bolts, a lot of torque. Don't you think you would want the 6-point socket, not the 12-point socket, when you're dealing with big bolts? So I never really understood that. If somebody could put in the comments why that is, maybe it's just to make it more user-friendly or whatever. But it would be nice to have 6-point sockets. But yeah, it's got SAE and metric in all the sockets that are in this entire kit. It also came with hex key sets, which I don't use very often, but when you need a hex key set, you need a hex key set. Also came with midget wrenches, which these are good for pulling out axle shafts in the rear differential. There's always that little set bolt back there, and sometimes the head of a ratchet is too close, so you can't actually get a ratchet in there, so you need one of these mini wrenches. So these are nice to have. It's nice that they're included with this socket set, I guess is what it's called. These are Torx bits. A lot of Ford seats use Torx fasteners to bolt them into the car. So when you need to take out a seat, whether you're just cleaning or you're repairing the seat or something, these are great to have. That's pretty much it. That's everything that I use. If I'm just trying to fix something, repairing a job, doing something like that, maybe I'll make another video about more specialized tools, so comment down below if you'd like to see that. But these are just my general tools that I pull out whenever I need to fix something. Could be replacing a belt, could be changing oil, could be doing a whole host of different things on cars, but this is just what I pull out. So it's good to have, and these aren't expensive tools, guys. This is Harbor Freight stuff, Craftsman stuff, is kind of middle of the road. So you don't need to spend a lot of money. Those guys with the huge Snap-on toolboxes are doing that work every day. If you're just at home playing with your car, fixing little things here and there, you don't need the expensive tools. There's no need to invest in all that. Just get the simple tools, get out there, get wrenching. You'll learn pretty quick what you need to upgrade, what you don't need to upgrade, what's good, what's bad. You'll figure it out as you go, and there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to have everything great from the beginning. So don't be afraid to get out there, work on your car, like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment if you liked it, comment if you hated it. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll catch you on the next video.